In the past 24 hours, Blackrock executives have been secretly meeting with the SEC. What does this mean for the Bitcoin ETF? Time to go around the blockchain. Thank you for joining, everybody. We got a very special episode because you may see Matt on yesterday. He did so good. I just want a little one-on-one time with him today. Now, Matt, we have a little joke. I would maybe say something about your background. I'm not going to do it today, but I almost mentioned something. You almost wanted to change. Where was the next location going to be?
For lack of a better term, it was probably going to be outside in my screened-in porch, but it's a bit cold today. So I was hoping that the book knowledge would kind of flow through the screen and into the viewership.
I think it's just going to pour right into your head like some sort of weird acid trip. All right, let's. Today we're going to be talking about Worldcoin, Tesla's Terminator, and Blackrock's secret meeting, everybody. But let's talk about Worldcoin first here. If I could just share this article. It's a new upgrade, Worldcoin ID 2.0. It's more privacy and human-centered digital access. And there's some pretty big, I would say, partnerships here. Shopify, fairly large. Minecraft, okay. Reddit. And you can't see he's cutting off Telegram right there. So we're seeing some pretty big partnerships in line. Although it's odd anytime someone has to say this is human-centered digital access. Why are you leading with that? Well, if we look here, this is what you might see looking at your peephole. So that's why you got to be prepared, everybody. But Worldcoin got a little bit of a pump after it. Human verification is a simply CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA is a good example. It's a part of a process to determine whether or not is this a human or is this a bot trying to game the system here. I'm just going to ask you, well, first off, Matt. I don't really know your thoughts on Sam. I like to emphasize alt man. What are your thoughts? Not so much on Sam and OpenAI, and we could talk about that for a while. What are your thoughts on Worldcoin?
I think it's very interesting to see the application of a cryptocurrency use case to this sort of notion of AI. I think one of the biggest aspects of being able to enjoy or embrace the Web3 ecosystem is the convergence of technology. So blockchain by itself is not super interesting. It's just a very expensive database. But when you open it publicly or when you stack smart contracts on it, it becomes very, very versatile and powerful. So I love to see the Worldcoin opportunity show up as a way for us to peer into these other use cases and see kind of how things might transform in the future, especially with respect to using our body or using our physical presence to engage in the digital world.
Well, you said peer into, what they're working on here. That made me think that, maybe you don't want to participate yourself. What would you rather do? Would you rather go up to a Worldcoin orb, scan your iris, or would you rather type out a CAPTCHA every day for the rest of your life?
I only have to do the I thing once?
Yes. And you only have to CAPTCHA once a day. We'll just say once a day.
I think there's a lot of people that have a real concern about privacy and a real concern about not doxing themselves, et cetera, which is fine. Like, I totally get that. I am of the belief that everything is out in the open. There's nothing I can particularly hide. And if it's going to benefit myself to be able to buy stuff on Shopify, which is not great for my wallet, but an easier way to go about it, then sure, why not?
All right, well, let's talk about the orb. We were joking around in the office today. We got a pretty big studio space out here in Atlanta. Should we host a Worldcoin orb, put it in the office? I wouldn't scan myself unless, someone tried to hit me with make me pass out, pull my eyelids open. But personally, I wouldn't do it. What about you, Matt? Would you host a Worldcoin orb and you earn world while doing it? There are probably some people who do want to scan their eyeball and get 10, 20 bucks of an altcoin. But what are your thoughts about orb hosting sites?
As a pure-blooded capitalist, most of the time, I have no problems with some entity that would be able to provide a business model for this case. So if there's a mechanism that says, hey, every time you scan, I'm going to get a little bit, or we're going to be a validator node, or whatever the case may be, I think that there's a real use case for this. And I think that, okay, maybe at a retail perspective in one office, that may not have a huge implication. But if you think of a Starbucks, for example, and you'd never have to use your card or pay anything, you come in there and it knows kind of who you are, which is creepy in and of itself. I think those things have real business model implications and possibilities for passive income or revenue that revenue streams that people haven't seen before. So I think it's a really, really interesting idea. Whether or not there's a market for it, or whether or not people are willing to do it, only time will tell. When I was a kid, my mom said, "Don't you ever put your birthday on the internet." And now I just give out my social security number because, well, I just need, like, everything requires it. So, we didn't want to buy things online with a credit card. We weren't, a credit card. Nobody's going to use a credit card. So I think these things just take a little bit of time. But I think from a business perspective, it's very interesting.
Yeah, your mother sounds like a smart individual. I would probably listen to that advice. Probably good advice for everybody. Hello, ATB crew. We see you in the chat. Everybody, thank you for the support. Go ahead, please hit that like button. All right, let's move on from WorldCoin to another potentially humanity-ending technology. Talking about Tesla's humanoid robots. Everyone, they're called Optimus Gen 2. Before we get into it, let's just go to the website here. I won't play the whole thing. It's about a minute. I think I'm going to skip ahead a couple parts here. There's a new bot in town. Check this out until the very end. Optimus Gen 1, you can see, hey, all right, we're getting a little bit better. We're getting a little bit cooler, a little bit sleeker. All right, okay. I see a patella. All right, hands getting a little bit better, skipping up. All right. Design, actuators, and sensors. And now look at it move. Who does that remind you when it's walking? That's reminding me of someone walking. Famous individual. I can't think of who it is, but that certainly reminds me of someone's gait. Now I'm just thinking, is that person a robot? I'm just kidding. Of course not. All right. Well, this is the new robot right now. It's called Optimus. It's the Optimus Gen 2, everybody. With this new version, 30% faster. Okay, so it can walk a little bit faster. It can carry, it's 10 kilograms less. So we got a little bit of a weight reduction. Also got the new hands, everybody. But Elon's putting out bold predictions when it comes to this Tesla robot. He's predicting they could sell as many as 10 to 20 billion units. There's only 8 billion humans. That'd be 2.5 robots for every human. 2.5 robots. So if you got a family of 5, okay, you're going to see about 12. You're going to see 13-ish robots floating around there. He's also confidently predicting that Optimus will account for a majority of Tesla's long-term value. He said, I think Optimus is going to be incredible in 5 or 10 years. Now, Matt, it's a lot of things we can unpack here. I'm just going to go with the most recent thing I was saying. He said it could eventually be Tesla's, a majority of Tesla's long-term value. What are your thoughts of that prediction? Is he really going to sell 10, 20 billion of these things?
I don't know if he's going to sell 10 or 20 billion, but I will tell you that from a granular perspective, it's probably a lot easier to sell this than a car. The batteries, I would say, are probably one of the better parts of Tesla's infrastructure. But again, those are probably going like they're getting a lot cheaper and a little bit more powerful as time goes on. So the benefit from a business model perspective, they probably have some diminishing returns. These things, as wild as they are, could be incredibly helpful, especially if you're doing construction or lifting or whatever the case is. But you see some of those Boston Dynamic videos. I'm not sure if they are using the same technology, but those things can do backflips. They can do a whole bunch of kind of crazy stuff. And then you've got the dogs too. And so if you've got 8 or 10 billion people ones, and who knows how many of the robotic dogs you might have that are carrying stuff around or doing things like that. So I definitely think there's a market for it, and they're probably going to be building it pretty profitably. So I got to say, it's probably not a bad idea.
All right, in chat, there's some pretty fun guesses on who that robot walks like. I'm not going to throw out any of my own personifications there, but let's look at some robots. Remember Honda, Matt? I'm a little bit older. When I was young, Honda was like the main game in town. So this is a little bit of the Honda robot. Is there a person in this? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think there is. But let's look at the top 5 humanoid robots. This is just going to be a fun little aside right here. Number 1, Nadine. Very, very creepy looking face. I think we could say that when it's a robot, right? We're not like shaming anybody here. So very, very creepy. Looks like some out of a horror film right there. This glowing skin and flowing brunette. All right, we also have Geminoid DK. This one looks, I don't like how they're looking at each other. Again, not creepy per se, but what's he doing when no one's looking? I'm joking, guys. Everybody, come on. Also, we have this one. This one's out of Tokyo. It's a successor of an earlier project, but this one also has speech recognition capabilities. in response to tourist questions. So it's doing a little bit of a tourist. This is a 5'5" tall one there. Again, I'm gonna keep the comments to myself, but just imagine the guy building this and dressing it. What do you think he was doing? Also, we have this one. I would just ask. Okay, all right. Very humanoid. Also, that one's now we're getting even more creepy. And then, last but not least, we talked to this person yesterday, Sophia the robot from AGIX. I actually saw this robot live. I think playing bass or something like that. All right. Well, I want to ask you pretty thought-provoking question, I thought. Do you think it's ironic that the human being most concerned with AI, Elon Musk, is more concerned about AI safety than anybody I've ever seen talk? Is it ironic he's building the robot that most closely resembles Terminator?
I think that there's a really interesting difference between this robot and all the other ones you showed, namely that they all have like skin and facial features and they're designed to emulate what humans look like, which in practice is nice, but when you see it actually up front, it's really creepy, it's really weird. That's why C3PO and R2D2 were so great. They didn't have flapping mouths, they didn't have a bunch of skin. It was very easy to kind of understand what they were doing, what they were saying, etc. That being said, he kind of has to go down that path of saying, let's do something a little bit different. Let's make this a little bit simpler. Let's focus on the actual functionality. And then a whole exoskeleton kind of comes together where you think, okay, it's got to emulate a body and it's got to look and feel kind of like the way we move so that we, presumably can understand better how it works. But it's just really creepy. All in, it's just very like, for somebody, like you said, who's so concerned with the profligation of AI in that sense, it's weird to see him kind of move in this direction. And I think one of the things I heard the other day in a Twitter space was once there is AI policing, it's basically George Orwell. It's 1984.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically over.
There's one thing I always like to point out. Anytime you see a robot miss a shot of water guns, of course, we're talking about water guns. Anytime you see a robot miss a shot, that is complete fabrication. That is complete fiction. These things are not going to miss. They could be traveling in their little motorbike 60 miles per hour, and they could hit a wing off a fly's backside there. Here we have C3PO. Chad actually is bringing up some pretty good points. If I can just share the screen. Shout out to Star Wars right there. This one doesn't look like a human, while a lot of the other ones do look like humans. What do you think of his choice to purposely avoid aspects of humanity with this robot?
I think it's in line with what you'd expect, especially if you look at the Cybertruck, because you have somebody that said, well, let's obviously do something that's completely different than what a truck is supposed to look like. So he's kind of taking his own note here to say we have to design something completely unique and different. To your point about Honda, I had known about Honda when I was a kid, and that was very, very symbolistic of, I don't think that's a word. It's a big symbol of what technology was then, and it was sort of the paragon of what robotics was going to look like. So there was another one too, I thought, that I can't remember the name of, but there are these sort of unique ones that come up every few years that we remember and we see. And I think it just makes it a lot easier to not have flapping mouths and nose and eyes. If you just make it a blank face, it does take the humanness out of it, which makes sure that we understand that they're machines and that there is a difference between us. But when they break into a bar and knock somebody down and put on their leather boots and leather jacket and steal their motorcycle, doesn't matter if they don't look like humans, if they're wearing human clothes.
Yeah, share the screen one more time. Yeah, and then you got the mixer. You got this one, a little bit creepy. Look how young Will Smith looks right there.
He's so good.
The mix. Yes, you know what? Still looking good. He's still looking good. They he can. And if you dare say anything otherwise, he'll slap you down. All right. Well, one last question before we talk about Blackrock. Are we going to reverse our declining birth rates globally, or just be a short answer? What do you see happening? Are we going to reverse declining birth rates, or are robots going to be wiping everyone's bottom when they're old?
I have a theory that robots are going to be used to perpetuate and facilitate our aging population. I think that people are going to continue to stop having children. I think that I heard Elon Musk say it on a space earlier this week. He's like, people got to have kids. We're in this really bad place right now where a lot of nations have declining birth rates. I think that's probably going to still continue. We're going to have aging problems, and these robots are going to be really, really good at changing bedpans, administering medicine, and feeding people.
All right. Yeah. And, I'm looking at some figures. You got like South Korea's birth rate, I think, is 0.7. And so a lot of people think, all right, we got a generation of 100 people. The next generation would have 70 with 0.7. No, the next generation reduces to 35. So if you have a town of 100,000, then a generation, it can go down to 35,000. The generation after that, you're looking at 10, 12,000. So yeah, it is a severe problem. It's really not that well understood, if I'm just going to be frank here. All right, let's talk about BlackRock now. BlackRock, they have a third meeting with the SEC over a spot ETF. Let me just share this tweet from Eric Balchunas. Damn, the SEC is busier than Santa's elves. BlackRock's third meeting with them yesterday is the most notable, in my opinion. And this is Eric Balchunas, the senior Bloomberg ETF analyst. This is the most notable, in my opinion, as everyone is waiting to see if they can convince the SEC to allow in-kind creations in the first run of its approval. So we're seeing, more and more issuers. It's not just BlackRock, folks. Other issuers, Grayscale met with them. Franklin met with them, and Fidelity each all had meetings last week. We're seeing a little bit of a gold rush. So I think it's 13 in line for ETF approval at this point. And BlackRock's, that was a lot of jargon basically saying they want people to just be able to give them cash. They convert the Bitcoin for them. And then it looks like a lot of people are saying 90% odds we're going to be approved by January 10th. What's today? The 13th. We're looking about 3-4 weeks away. All right. Now, Matt, what's your broad thoughts on BlackRock, some of these asset managers entering the Bitcoin ETF race? Is this all smoke and mirrors? Is it push back to later in the year, or is this all this happening in January, you think?
I definitely think that it's happening in January, if not Q1. I think if not, then it's probably going to get denied, which is going to have its own set of consequences. One benefit, though, to having these conversations is that you'll be able to see more applications for things like a spot Ethereum ETF and potentially others, depending on their classifications as securities, commodities, et cetera. As somebody who is a big Bitcoin fan, I don't love the fact that more people come in and potentially make a decentralized protocol more centralized by owning lots of it. However, there is the need for institutional capital and massive amounts of institutional capital. There's over $100 trillion in institutional capital that's sitting there waiting to be put to use. And if there's ways that they can do that encompasses Bitcoin and allows people to put it in their 401k or their IRA, I'm all for it. And I think what's really important to remember this time it's different. When they did the futures contract, those are settled in cash, not having to have the actual Bitcoin held. So this spot ETF requires them, as BlackRock or Fidelity or whatever exchange you're going to go through, to actually hold the one-to-one amount of Bitcoin that they're going to be buying and selling. So it's going to require them to continue accumulating, which some might have argued they're already doing, which has been maybe the cause of this run-up. But it's definitely a positive for the ecosystem if we really do want adoption and more institutional money to flow into the system.
I did a little research on the gold ETFs back in 2004, and it actually took about 6 months from the first approval to actually be greenlit where they could receive funds. The next one, I think it got reduced down to about 2 months, so it got shorter and shorter as time went along. But after the gold ETF was approved, gold really didn't, it actually kind of, went up for a week or two, but then it actually declined and went flat for 6 months. And finally, after 6 months, that's when gold began its 8-year bull run. Do you see something similar happening with Bitcoin? Are we going to get like a buy the rumor, sell the news? Maybe it pumps for a couple of weeks, but do you see it, the bloom leaving the rose after a couple months or so?
I think that if it coincides with the halving, which, if it's a January event and we think the halving might happen in April, maybe late March, early April, there could be some adverse sort of corrections. And I don't think that that's bad at all. If anything, you're dollar cost averaging and you're finding lower ways to, lower entry points for continuing to buy. It would be interesting to see what that time difference is and compare the two. My thinking is that gold is not a very exciting thing to invest in, right? It doesn't move a lot, it doesn't have a ton of volatility. I was reading today that the the last volatilities, like the recent volatility of Bitcoin is about 50%. But when it was in its bull run in 2021, it was about 150%. So I think that from a volatility standpoint, Bitcoin has a much larger and wider spectrum for where it can go after an ETF than gold. But I think gold is, the thing you put, your grandma gives you like a little bar of gold, for your birthday or something like that. Hopefully they'll start giving some Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I looked at some of those numbers. The gold ETF had about $90 billion poured into it in a short amount of time. So careful when you see trillions will flow into Bitcoin. Probably going to be closer to the 100 billion-ish range. Maybe it doubles or triples. I wouldn't expect a 20x. I wouldn't expect any kind of factor increase there. Looking at some of the chat questions here, people are really having fun talking about how many kids they need to have and robots. You guys just want to talk about robots. Not any kind of PG way, everyone. All right. Well, again, chat, you guys. But you know what? We do have some people just like Bitcoin in the chat as well. All right. I'm looking, Christmas is around the corner. We got more and more people talking about Bitcoin. We have Larry Fink saying, it's a flight to quality. More and more people, more and more family members who aren't Bitcoiners, aren't orange pilled. Maybe you're going to be asking people around the holidays, New Year's and such. If you had a cousin, what do you think they would rather receive for Christmas? Would they rather get a BlackRock Bitcoin ETF, packet? You're like, hey, I put $1,000 in this and you can link it with your 401k. Or do you think they'd rather just have $1,000 of Bitcoin on a Coinbase app?
That's a good question. As a registered investment advisor, I wouldn't use BlackRock to sell an ETF. I would be able to do it myself. So
what's that name? Yeah. Plug yourself, man. Come on.
Block 3 Strategy Group is the name of my company. We're a registered investment advisor. We can give investment advice on anything from a security to a cryptocurrency. And the whole point was to differentiate ourselves and credential ourselves in a whole spectrum of places where people can't give financial advice. We can legally do it. So as an RIA, when the ETF is approved, I can now sell that as an instrument to anybody that would be interested in it. So I will put my little ETFs in stockings this year. But I think some people from a liquidity perspective would probably rather have 1,000 Bitcoin in their Coinbase app and or in any staking protocols. I don't think the ETFs have any staking capabilities, so you're not going to earn any passive income. I think that would be a really interesting option too, just to kind of consider it that way.
When it comes to staking opportunities, let's just say with Bitcoin, at what percentage do you start to pucker up a little bit? For me, I don't want to go above 3%. Or now I'm like, all right, where's the yield coming from? What's your number?
Yeah, it's if you asked me in 2021 when I had my Celsius app on,
I'd add a 0 to my number today.
12%, 14%. Which one do I choose? Anything below 5 is going to be pretty good for me. I think you have to think of where investors or people who are speculating on the market need to consider where the market is for interest. What is the cost of that money? And if you're selling your assets for 2.5 times that cost of money, it's got to come from somewhere. And it's, this magic internet money. So it could be commingled funds or whatever the case may be. So I like to stay under 5% for a pretty consistent and solid yield.
All right. And we just got some followers from the chat. We appreciate you supporting, the guest that came on, Matthew Snider, always breaking down really, really good takes, really, really nuanced takes. And he's got some of the best backgrounds in all of crypto, everybody. But Matt, we're going to go ahead and let you get the parting thoughts in. Feel free, just leave us 10, 20, 30 seconds of what you got going on. You can plug Block 3 if you want. Give us that financial advice, Matt.
Yeah. So again, my name is Matthew Snider. I run Block 3 Strategy Group. We are an organization dedicated to helping businesses, brands, and entrepreneurs monetize on the blockchain, come up with new user experiences on the blockchain, and we also provide investment advice. And the thing that we always like to talk people about is we do it in a sustainable and pragmatic and long-term growth way. We don't want people to be looking at a lot of these pump and dump tokens. We want people to be thinking methodically about how they're planning their investments and how cryptocurrencies can be part of that. They absolutely should be. The last thing I'll leave you with is a 1%, just a 1% allocation of Bitcoin in your portfolio. A traditional 60-40 portfolio has outperformed the market over the last 10 years. 2.5% and 5.5%, certainly much better too, but just 1% can put you above your peers in terms of a traditional 60-40 portfolio.
Yeah, and I heard if you put that 1% in a meme coin, oh baby, it's Lambos. Just be careful with your funds there. Be Sathu, as people would say. Well, Matt's link is down in the description below. Go check out his content. Go follow him on X. Really, really good advice. And hey, you want to park some money, you don't want to give it a Larry Fink. I'd rather give it to Matt than Larry Fink any day of the week and twice on Sunday. So that's going to be my 2 cents there. All right, folks, thank you for joining. Go ahead and hit that like button on your way out. And we'll see you tomorrow morning.